Fiery debate last night as Republican presidential nominee candidates sparred without frontrunner Donald Trump in attendance, as you heard a couple of those candidates mention. The political battle happening as Washington barrels toward a potential government shutdown with the Capitol and White House deadlocked. Here to help us break it all down, Vanity Fair special correspondent Brian Stelter and the Atlantic staff writer David Frum. Hi to both of you. Great to have you back with us. David, I'll start with you. Was that debate meaningful in any way?
Zero. Not at all.
Okay.
If you are going to be president of the United States, you're going to face challenge upon challenge. You can't flinch from those challenges. But the candidates on that stage, or the aspirants, I should call them, on that stage, did flinch. That they want to take away something that Donald Trump currently has, and they're afraid to challenge him. If they're afraid to challenge Donald Trump, they're going to be afraid to do just about everything they need to do in that job. So it was not a real show. It was a show, but it wasn't a real contest because they were not seeking the prize from the person they have to take it away from.
Is there any way any of these debates do become impactful at some point, Brian, if Donald Trump is never there?
There's only a couple of wild cards. One is some candidate or candidates that are not currently in the picture somehow, changing the dynamic of the race. Another wild card are, of course, Trump's indictments and the criminal trials that are coming ahead. But none of those are going to happen necessarily as quickly as this primary process. And then I suppose a third wild card would be something done or said by one of these candidates that actually changes the race in any meaningful way. I am skeptical of any of those actually happening, though. There's no sign that any of those wild cards are actually going to be played or could actually happen. So the short answer to your question is no. These debates will become less and less and less relevant, except as a possible vice presidential process.
At the same time as that debate happens, there's some new legal news, both in the civil realm and criminal realm, David, for Donald Trump. We have some polling that we can put up on the board. It still continues to not really have an impact on Trump as far as the GOP goes. But even in the overall, the kind of story over last weekend and into this week was even among the general electoral populace, Trump seems to be gaining a bit of ground.
Well, that's a strange poll to me. Most of the polls I see show President Biden comfortably ahead. And we also have a record. We have the record of what happened in 2022 when the Democrats had the best off-year performance of a party of the president since the 1930s, where they lost a handful of seats in the House of Representatives, it's true, but gained a Senate seat, gained 2 governorships, and gained 4 state chambers, which is a very unusual thing for the party of the president to do during an off-year election. I think it has not really penetrated very much of the public yet just how much danger Donald Trump is in. And one of the things, when I talk about how weak these candidates are, one of the questions Ron DeSantis has been asked in particular over and over again is, how would you be different from Donald Trump? And he needs to say, the thing I would say, well, for starters, it's there's a very good chance that on election day, Donald Trump will be in prison. And I will not be. That if you're going to fight Donald Trump, you have to make his own party understand they're in danger of nominating somebody or supporting someone who is going to be in prison very possibly by November of next year. And if elected president, is going to plunge the country into a constitutional crisis as he tries to shut down law enforcement to protect himself from the gathering likelihood that one of these 4 trials, criminal trials he faces, and innumerable civil, is going to send him to prison.
It's interesting, just jumping off that, Brian, because today President Biden sort of launched an attack that was very much actually exactly what David just laid out, kind of like, here's the reality of the situation that Donald Trump is in. Do you think that that poll was from ABC News over the weekend? Do you think it's an outlier?
The ABC poll is technically an outlier, but it's also important for the following reason. People in the United States and beyond need to recognize that a Trump second term is very possible. If we are able to somehow remove the legal threats, and it's impossible to remove them, I agree with David. But to the extent that can Trump win enough electoral college seats in order to become president again, whether he's in prison, that possibility of reaching 270 is very real. He received 46% of the popular vote in both 2016 and 2020. There is a rock solid base there. Now, I tend to believe that Biden is more competitive than that one poll indicates. I think there's lots of reasons to believe that Biden this time next year would be polling much more favorably. But we have to take seriously the threat. In addition to, as David said, the very possible scenario that Trump will be in prison this time next year. I suppose there are so many more unknowns or more uncertain variables than there ever usually are in a U.S. presidential election.
Speaking of variables, although it seems a little less unknown at this point, David, do you think that the government will shut down?
Seems highly likely. I'm taking it a little personally because I have to fly on the 1st of October, and shutdowns have a terrible impact on air travel, and my record with air travel is quite unlucky. So I would just say to anyone watching, thinking of flying to the United States, try to do it a little later in the month of October, or else get out there before the end of September if you possibly can.
Travel advice I did not have in my crystal ball for tonight, but we'll take it. Brian, if or when the shutdown happens, politically, who is wearing it right now?
Right now, the Republicans, absolutely the Republicans, and many House Republicans know that. Some House Republicans are even admitting that, and they are recognizing that they will get blamed for this shutdown. This is happening mostly because of a radical wing of the Republican Party that does not want to govern. They only want madness and chaos. They basically admit that. Most other lawmakers do not want this, but they're being forced into it. They're being driven into it. And in some ways, I think Democrats, including President Biden, are licking their chops, seeing opportunity out of this, even though, let's remember, the most important part is what David just underscored, the actual human impacts. Why will the airports be a mess? Because there won't be as many workers there. There will be hundreds of thousands of workers who will be losing out on paychecks, who will have a harder time paying the bills. And that human reality, it's incumbent on the media as well as lawmakers to make that human reality very clear. That this is, yes, it's about a radical fringe minority of lawmakers that are trying to drive the country into a ditch. But there's a real human impact, whether this goes on for a day or a week or a month. And it is possible this is not going to be the only one. That what these lawmakers are going to do is they're just going to keep kicking the can down the road for a few weeks or a few months at a time, and then we'll be back in this position. And ultimately, yes, the Republicans wear it, and they know that they wear this.
Oh, go ahead, yeah.
Because there's not a functional Republican majority in the House, there's a real question, if this shutdown happens, how does it end?
Or does it? When does it, I guess? Yeah. Okay, thank you so much, both of you. Appreciate you helping us make sense of that. It's a bit confusing to a lot of us on this side of the border. David Frum and Brian Stelter, thanks very much again.
Bye-bye.
Coming up.